Hello, welcome to the vendor due diligence launch demo. For those on the line, we're just a minute before 4:15 Eastern time, so we'll give it just a couple minutes for other attendees to join. So just hold on the line. And maybe as well, just if a couple people on the line could just confirm in the question panel that you can hear the audio coming through, okay? Great. Looks like we have a couple of confirmations. Yep. No, the screen is not yet sharing. It'll be sharing in just a second. So bear with. And the screen should be showing now. Just can you verify you see MyRA compliance vendor due diligence on your screen? And I think we've got confirmation people can see the screen, so should be good on that front. So I will, we'll still give it a couple more minutes for folks to join, just another minute or two actually, and then we'll get started. Looks like there was a question as we get started, just on the hearing the audio, just around can you be here through the computer? You should be able to if you've connected to the audio through your computer. So that question was just the passcode went away before I could push it in. So hopefully the person that asked that question is able to hear. Let me just verify for this person. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here now, as we're just a couple minutes after the start time. And as people join, we can still have one second. We still have one person or a couple people that are having trouble hearing. So we'll make sure we get this squared away for a second, and we'll get started. Okay. So, all right. Well, thank you again. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar, we will be discussing the new vendor due diligence module within MyRA Compliance. This vendor due diligence tool will be the first of several new tools and offerings relating to cybersecurity. And so we look forward to getting utilization of this first piece of that tool from our clients, and we just released it officially to clients, to all clients free of charge for a limited time, starting on Monday. So, and it looks like a fair number of folks have actually already gotten to try out or look at the tool a little bit, but this is the initial version. Again, we're certainly looking to also enhance this vendor due diligence component as we go on, and we'll talk a little bit about that here briefly today, and we'll briefly go through the tool as well as have plenty of time for questions. So so the first component of the vendor due diligence tool, and hopefully again everyone should be able to see my screen now. will be around the aspect of documents and a centralized portal for collecting documents from all the vendors that you work with. And certainly within vendor due diligence, third-party risk assessment, that's an important piece. And rather than having to have many different one-off requests to all different vendors, having it all kind of in one place where you have a centralized repository of all the documents for the vendors that you work with is the overall goal of this first component of the vendor due diligence tool. And so we'll go through that here within the solution. And certainly as you start using the solution, would like to hear any feedback that you may have as we continue to add more vendors onto the portal. We're thinking about other kind of pain points around questionnaires, vendor questionnaires, which we haven't yet addressed in the solution. Thinking about things like vendor risk assessment and how we can help around that. And those are some of the things kind of on the horizon that we'll be evaluating based on the feedback that we get from customers, and certainly any other things that you have in mind. But so here, just launching into the tool. So first of all, the place where you will find the solution is within your compliance tools section within the navigation bar, and you'll go to the vendor due diligence section. And so within here, within this kind of our demo account, so in this particular demo account, I've already subscribed to 2 vendors, to Morningstar and Riskalyze. And so if I were to click on one of these 2 vendors that I have subscribed to, I can see their particular documents here showing that the different types of documents, security program overview, SOC 1 Type 2, SOC 2 Type 2, and so forth. And so, easy enough. And if I were to click on any of these, in this case, let's click on the technical specifications. I can download that, or I can mark it as reviewed, and any of those reviews will go onto my compliance log. So that's the basics, and I can view any information about that vendor as far as the description they may have of the vendor, or the response, any documents associated with them that I uploaded if I had an NDA or client contract or something like that that I uploaded during the approval process of getting access to those documents. Then I would do that here. So right now, so we've got Morningstar, Riskalyze on here. That we have initially several vendors that have signed on for the initial launch of the solution, and we'll be looking to add many more in the coming weeks. But our plan was to really roll it out with a small group of vendors that have a lot of common clients with us, and then look to expand to others. So Morningstar, Riskalyze, Orion, and also has documents available within the system. In this particular example, I hadn't subscribed to them yet. Redtail actually is also going to be coming on board here with this initial launch. They are in process still of uploading their documents, so that should be complete within the next couple of days. So certainly you can go ahead and start the process of requesting them, and then they should approve if you are a Redtail client, and you can go through that process. So so here we've got Orion, Redtail are in a box. So for example, if you want our documents, then you can subscribe to those as well. In this case, I'm going to show you how you request a subscription to the vendors that exist as it stands, and also show you how you can request other vendors that are not yet on the platform to join. So in this case, generic service provider LLCs, the demo account we have set up here, we would go in, we can say, verify that yes, we're under NDA or client contract with this vendor. Can say yes or no, and if no, then some of these vendors, may, require you to, even if you are under just a basic contract with them, might require an NDA. They can always, if they require that, they can always send a pending acceptance or rejection with the condition that you go through the NDA process with them. So others don't have that restriction per se. So you'll kind of see that as you go through the system. But if they do, and if that vendor has provided an NDA for you, their generic NDA to download, you can download it, sign it, upload it, and do that as all part of the seamless kind of request process and request addition. So in this case, I'm just going to say, and you don't have to in that case either. This says For some of these vendors, they might choose to only make publicly available documents accessible to you, or to choose not to sign an NDA if you're not already under NDA or contract with them. And that's probably more for vendors you might be considering as a prospect and so forth generally, but will vary depending on the vendor. One thing, so we'll go ahead in this case and we'll request an addition to this generic vendor. One thing, again, I want to point out, when you first enter the system as well, you'll notice the disclaimer at the bottom, but also you have to agree to that the first time you log into the platform, just saying that, these are third-party vendors not associated with R-in-a-Box. So these are documents not provided by R-in-a-Box, provided by third-party vendors. And so just, that we're obviously not necessarily vouching for these vendors, that's the protections are all related to that. So it's got a disclaimer language, so you'll sign off on that when you first sign in. Now, on the vendor side, you won't necessarily see this, but generally I'm going to go ahead and I need to approve the vendor here. They'll get a notification on the vendor side that yes, this particular client wants to be added. And here's all the documents this particular vendor has. Some are require an NDA, some do not, and they can control that on their end. So I'll just go and approve quick so that we can see on the client side for an RIA firm what that will look like. So I'm going to go ahead and approve the request, and I will say, in this case, just so we can see all the documents, I'm going to say that yes, there's a client contract or NDA signed, and I, as a vendor, have verified that. So we go through that, and now on our side, we'll see a notification come through that Service Provider LLC has approved our subscription to the vendor documents for review. So quick reload so it shows up here, and so we've got the vendor, we see each of the different documents that they have here. Now, before I go deeper in that, I also want to just point out something here. So again, Morningstar, Riskalyze, and Orion are, and now Redtail as well are the first 4 vendors that have signed on for this initial launch phase. But I'm sure there are many other, vendors. There are many, as we know, there are many other vendors that you use, and so we'll be looking to add a lot of those onto the platform in the coming weeks and months. So the way to request and the way that we'll approach these will certainly be based on volume and interest of the vendors that we need to get on board, and hopefully eventually have the majority, not all, of these vendors loading their documents onto the platform. So the way to do that, again, you would request, and I'll go through that path again one more time. You hit plus sign, say, I look at my selection of vendors, say, okay, I don't see, some of the ones that I want. So I'm going to say, request the following vendors be added to the MyRA Compliance Vendor Due Diligence platform. Got it broken down by the categories here, some of the common vendors in each of these different categories. You can select as many as you like. Within each of the categories, there's also a place for other, where you can enter other vendor names here within that category. In addition, if it is outside of these categories as well, you can certainly add in, other, vendors in the others not listed category. Now, R-in-a-Box is already on, so I wouldn't necessarily type them. I'm just typing for the sake of, some names here. But for this, if you're typing the generic vendor box, you would want to separate the different vendors by line. And we'll store those in the database, and that way we can go to those vendors and say, certain X number of RIA firms have requested you become part of the vendor due diligence portal, and that way that they know that it's certainly a need. And then additionally, we'll have a database of the clients that have requested that, so we can certainly notify you once these vendors have joined the vendor due diligence platform. So from here, so we've got the vendor that we just requested. We have access now to these generic sample, documents, data security policy, and other documents. So again, when I go on, I can look at these within, if they're PDF documents, I can look at them within the viewer. I can mark them as reviewed, and I can download them as well, for the majority of these documents. And when I mark those as reviewed, and again, I can also view, information about this vendor, any documents, so if I have an NDA with them that I uploaded, it would be here, the description of that vendor, and so forth. And again, all the reviews that I've done of different documents will go on to the compliance log where you have all of your different compliance activities. And so that'll be in a section at the bottom of the compliance log that says, yes, I reviewed the cybersecurity summary from Orion, the Morningstar Office technical specs, and the SOC 2 from Generic Service Provider LLC, and what date that happened, as well as any notes I have on those reviews. So, so that again will go into the compliance log, and so that's the basics of really this first version of the vendor due diligence tool. I'm going to stop there and start to address some of the questions that have come in. We've gotten a fair number of questions come in, but certainly if you have other questions we've not yet addressed, please go ahead and type those into the question box that you have there on GoToWebinar. And I will address some of these questions that we've received so far. So there's a couple questions about the NDA. Sorry, apologies for that in terms of using abbreviations here. For those, just to confirm, yes, that is the non-disclosure agreement. And probably many, again, many of these, you don't necessarily need a separate non-disclosure agreement with them if you had a client contract with them. But for some of them, they may require that if it's not covered for some reason under their client contract. Or the other place where that could apply would be in the case where you are not a client yet of that vendor, but are doing due diligence prospectively for consideration around that firm. In which case, you may need to either go through potentially go through the non-disclosure agreement signing through our system, or directly with that vendor, and then they can approve you to access their documents. Some other questions that are coming in. Let's see here. So we've got questions around certain specific vendors like DocuSign and others. DocuSign and is not yet a vendor on the platform, but certainly if you're interested in having them on, then certainly them in that selection box that we just looked at, so we can make sure we can bring that to DocuSign and say, this number of clients requested it. There's also a couple requests around brokerage firms and the custodians. Could they be added on that? And let's see. And so, yeah, certainly you could add any, request to add any of these vendors. We will prospectively look at, trying to get, again, as many of the different vendors that folks use onto the vendor due diligence platform. So, again, based on whichever one that you use, to the degree that you want to request them, again, go ahead and you can put that in. And we will assess, again, over time what vendors that will be added, but we do want to get all the most common vendors added that folks are using. But this is, again, just the initial rollout. Let's see, a couple other questions. There's a question around where do we go to, let's see, a question about vendor puts those up there, the documents. So yeah, they put the different documents, and some people ask like SOC 1 and some of those other types of documents. Some of your vendors you won't necessarily need a SOC 1 or SOC 2 audit. Some of them you would. Depends on how sensitive the information is that's housed with that particular vendor. Whether they has more non-public information for you or not. But yeah, the vendor is the one loading all these documents onto their side of the portal, and they would be the ones approving you. They have a login to MyRA Compliance to a different view than you do as a RA firm client. Specifically, their view of the portal is just around approving RA firms for these, just loading the documents and approving RA firms that have requested access to those documents. And they get notified right away when clients request access. And then again, the thing I should point out is, you'll be notified whenever they either upload new documents or update or replace documents as well, so that you have those, again, the most updated documents all in one place. Whenever you have an audit or anything else like that and you need these documents, you won't have to go chase down all those vendors. You'll have them, again, all in one place, and they'll be notified around that. Let's see. Let me scroll down through some of these other questions. Let's see. The question around the cost for the service under the different levels of service we have. Currently, this service is available to all clients regardless of service level. Depending as we add more and more features to this service, and especially as we add more and more features to the vendor due diligence tool, that will not necessarily always be the case, but initially at least we will have this service available for all levels of service to get experience with the product. So that is the current setup on that. So all of you on the line today should have access to the solution within whatever level of service you may have. And question was around, should we do this even though we are already actively using these vendors? Absolutely. That would be the idea, is that rather than you having to reach out to those vendors directly to get the documents, or to reach out to get updates on it, that they will provide those documents to you through the portal. So if you are a Morningstar, Orion, or Riskalyze, or any of these other vendors, Redtail, any of the others ones that will add onto the platform, you should absolutely subscribe to their documents and use them through the platform. And that way you have access that way, rather than having to email them, each of them separately, different times. Another question around, does the system describe or explain the various reports that need to be uploaded or obtained going through the process, being able to discuss what those items actually tell me, so that they can properly review them would be important. So when they add the different documents, so the vendors will add the ones that they feel are important, and that's certainly something. Depending on if there's questions on some of that initially, we can always look at even adding more explanation around these documents into the tool over time. There's some level of explanation that vendors put in on that, but and certainly if you are working with one of our compliance consultants as well, they can certainly help you in understanding which documents are important for what types of vendors. Over time, again, we may, as we look at more of a vendor risk assessment component within this tool, we may add more of that into the system around helping you understand which documents may be required for which types of vendors, especially as we look to expand our broader cybersecurity offering in the first half of the year. There's a lot of other questions that are coming in. If we do not support a particular vendor, how do we document that due diligence? So yeah, currently there wouldn't be a way yet in this system, but we're looking at that as well. I mean, ideally we would like to get all these vendors on the platform, but as we look to develop out a full kind of way for you to document all of your vendor due diligence in the system, we'll look at that for vendors, how you do that for vendors that are not in the system, but that's not necessarily part of the initial version, but it's a great question that we've thought about as well. And will these be updated annually? I mean, in theory, that's up to the vendor that you're working with or that you are contracted with, but we will certainly have mechanisms for the vendor within their portal that they can see, and you can see when they uploaded these documents, and they should be refreshing them on a periodic basis as well. And so, again, based on the feedback we get, we may build in prompts to remind them as well to update those documents on a periodic basis. A question around some other questions around additional docs that vendors didn't upload. Can we request those? So that's a great question as well. And so there's not necessarily a direct mechanism for that presently, but it's a good suggestion as well, and something we'll certainly consider and we've actually thought about as well. Question around what documents we stored from each vendor. It really depends, again, on the vendor. They know typically what documents that they're being requested, from them, based on the types of information that they hold and the level of risk associated with them as a type of vendor. So it won't necessarily be complete 100% standard across all vendors. It really will depend on the vendor. And again, over time, we may look at building more kind of intelligence into the system so you understand a little more as we think about what employees are using what vendors to see what types of documents you would want and how you assess the overall risk. But generally speaking, it could be things, again, like the business continuity policy, information security policy. For some vendors, the SOC 2 audit documents would be important to get. But it will depend on some of that as far as the particular, how you're using a particular vendor and what type of vendor they are. There's a couple other questions I think that look like they're still coming in. I think we've addressed most of the major questions, but let me take a quick look through here, and I'll pause again for a minute to give people a chance to put in any other questions that haven't been addressed yet. While we're waiting for if there are any other questions that may come in. Again, I do want to point out again, we do just initially have this set of 4 or 5 vendors that we know are very common vendors with the common vendors that have common clients of ours. But this is by no means all the vendors that will be. We anticipate many vendors, and we actually have a lot of vendors already that have expressed interest in joining the platform. But we intentionally kept it to a relatively small group initially to gather feedback from these vendors and to make sure they all had their documents loaded when we launched the platform. But we have a wait list of vendors already that have asked about the program based on the press release that they saw a couple weeks ago and the announcement at the T3 conference. So we will certainly be adding more vendors in the future. I know there's been a couple questions about a variety of different types of vendors and specific vendors. So stay tuned on that. So one person again asked as well, one of the questions was just reviewing how you ask for specific vendors that are not already within the platform. Again, there's the vendors that are here already, the ones that we showed there that have approved me and the others that haven't yet. And then there's a button right there underneath. So again, to review, hit the plus sign, and now we pop up there, send requests request other vendors to join the platform, and then this is where we see the list of common vendors. But again, we can type in other on any of these categories or any other category not covered by these within the system. Question around how long does it take to add a vendor once the vendor has been requested. The answer on that would be, it should be pretty quick. It obviously depends on the vendor. That is up to them and the person on their side that is controlling the approval process. So I know some of the vendors have an SLA about how quickly they handle these types of requests for documents. Some may not, and so can't give a steadfast guarantee of how quickly they will do that. But we'll certainly, if you have delays, we will also internally review a list, probably each week of any pending requests and how long those have been pending, so that if we need to check in with a vendor to see why they have not approved a request, and if it's taken too long, we can make sure to at least address that. So, and also certainly if you run into that with certain vendors, then you can let us know, and we'll certainly look into that. Question around, will our inbox send us a notification when a request is received or declined? Yeah, so there's a notification that would come through when you request is received or declined within the platform on things, as well as email notification on some of those. If you would like more information, if there's not enough sufficient information in the notification that you'd like to know, then you may need to let us know so we can reach out to that vendor if they can improve or include enough information around any rejection, if there's certain more information of something you need to do in regards to getting, to resubmit and to get approved. Question around, will we be notified when a vendor submits updates? Answer to that is yes. When the vendor updates or loads a new document, then you would also receive a notification of that. So that's another one of the big values within the system. And let me check this one more time here. Any other questions that we haven't? Yeah, so there's another question again about manually adding a vendor that's not in the system, because there may be certain vendors that you have that will, may not ever join the RA-in-a-Box platform. And so, yeah, we're certainly considering that around the best way to address that for clients, so that you still have a place to document the due diligence that you've done around those vendors, because those are still important. Obviously, we'd like for all the vendors that you work with to be on the platform, but, realistically, there will be some of certain types that are maybe, that maybe will not, like, for example, someone asked a question around that they doubt their bank would ever join the RA-in-a-Box system, but they'd like to have the due diligence documented for their bank. So it's a fair question, and again, something we're definitely thinking about within the platform going forward, beyond this initial version, based on all the feedback that we get from customers. All right, let me take one more look through here if there's any other questions of different types that we have not yet addressed. And then we'll probably wrap up here in just a couple of minutes. But so if you have any last questions, and if there are any questions that we didn't get to, that we did not get to today, that you had asked, either that you asked in the question box or that you want to ask separately, certainly feel free to reach out to us on the questions that you didn't get to ask. If there's ones we didn't address or answer, we'll certainly try to reach out via email to answer those questions as well. There's this question around can these vendor review docs be copied for our partner's vendor review file? And let's see, and then so those are additional questions. There was a question around, and I'm not sure if and that one probably will get back to make sure I understand the question on that particular one. And then there's another question around, and actually this one I will address here. This question is, RA-in-a-Box does due diligence. Why should we repeat it? Again, that's part of the disclaimer within the module, in that we're not attesting to any of these vendors. We don't necessarily utilize, all of these vendors and other vendors that may join the platform. It's not, it is really your responsibility as an RA firm to do due diligence on the vendors that you choose to contract with, and that is not something that, since we are not contracted with them, other than allowing them access to this vendor platform. But we're not attesting to the due diligence on them. That is still, ultimately the responsibility of the individual RA firm. But we're providing a portal and a pathway and a method for you to more easily do that due diligence within our system, and document it that you've done it for the auditors. Okay, and so I think that addresses let's see here if there's any others that that we can answer before we wrap up. And I think that addresses the majority of the themes of the questions that came in. Again, apologize if there's a couple that we didn't get to or cover. But we will certainly review all the ones that came in. If there's anything we did not cover as far as your specific questions, then we will reach back out to help address that. And certainly feel free to reach out with other questions beyond what was asked today. And as well, as you start to use the platform, please definitely reach out with any feedback that you have for the product and ways that we can continue to make it better. We're excited to continue to make the vendor due diligence module better, as well as our other cybersecurity offerings that are in the works for this year. And so again, we look forward to hearing any feedback that you may have and ideas that we can utilize to help make the solution better for you, as well as for all of our other clients. So thanks again for joining today, and we look forward again to hearing your feedback. And, good luck again as you start utilizing the vendor due diligence tools with the rest of MyRate compliance. And have a great rest of your day.